You tell me how you'd like to do this.
Why don't you just take your own questions, folks, please?
Sure.
Has there been an example in history where an authoritarian regime has been toppled and the people have created a fully democratic regime on their own without foreign intervention?
Sure, there are such examples. And there are even debates about the cases where it looks like foreign intervention, but some people in the debate say that the foreign intervention wasn't the decisive factor. And those few cases where there's been success give hope that it can be done or replicated in other cases. So the obvious successes, West Germany and Japan post-World War II, those are the two most important successes. And then there's a debate in both of those cases whether the US occupation was or was not a decisive factor, or whether the society themselves established stable market economies and stable democracies. Right? It's a difficult debate to resolve. I'm not going to rehearse that debate right now, but those are the two most important cases from which this literature begins. There's the case of Turkey during and after Ataturk. That's considered a really important case. There's the case of South Korea, also considered a crucial case. And there's the case of Taiwan. Right? Those are the most referred to cases where you had a serious, for real authoritarian regime, and then you got something much better, which is now a stable rule of law order. Right? There are a couple of other cases, but those are the main ones in the literature. And then there are many more cases where you didn't get that. And so people try to isolate what the factors were in those successful cases and see how they can be applied. Right? Do you need foreign occupation or not, which was part of your question. So a Japanese civil servant in the Ministry of Roads goes to China. And he makes $10,000 a month in Japan. And he meets his counterpart in the Ministry of Roads in China. And the Ministry of Roads guy in China, he makes $1,000 a month rather than $10,000 as a salary. And his house is 10 times larger. So 1/10 the salary and 10 times larger the house. So it's not really polite to ask, but the Japanese civil servant can't resist. And he says, you make 1/10 of what I make, and yet your house is 10 times larger. There's something that I don't understand. And he takes him over to the window, and he says, you see that road? He says, yeah, I see that road. 20%. Meaning he siphoned off 20% of the state allocation to his own pocket for building the road. And then the Japanese civil servant goes to Nigeria and gets to Nigeria and meets the counterpart in Nigeria. And the Nigerian civil servant makes $100 a month. Not 10,000 like the Japanese civil servant, and not 1,000 like the Chinese one. And his house is 100 times larger than the Japanese guy's house, which means it's got 3 rooms. I lived in Japan for 2.5 years. And once again, he poses the question, geez, how is it possible that you make only $100 a month and your house is so big? And he takes him over to the window and he says, you see that road out there? And the Japanese civil servant, like me, has to stand on tippy toes and looks out and says, no, I don't see any road out there. And the Nigerian says, that's right, 100%. So in one country you have a road, and in another country you don't have a road. So that's where you got to talk about when you use terms like corruption. It's not an absolute question. It's whether you got the road or not. And then whether the road is quality enough road that it won't collapse on you, and whether your kids, if there's a earthquake, your kids won't be trapped in their school, right? It's not built out of sand, etc. There's all sorts of ways to measure these things rather than in the usual dollar terms of corruption. So that's a big problem for authoritarian regimes also in this transition phase, because sometimes the transition can involve a lot of expropriation of property. But there are those cases maybe you'll figure out what was the key factor and how it can be applied to other cases.
So, are there authoritarian regimes that are supported by the United States? And how do you feel about it, if there are? I think there were, but I'm sure.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I don't work for the government, so I'm not involved in any of that type of direct activity myself. But I am a citizen of the country and I pay taxes, so I have responsibility in that sense. So you pay decent money for this education here at Dartmouth would be my guess, if the prices here are anything like the prices I know back home. But I'm going to give you a discount on this one. Now, this is called Geopolitics 101. This should do, for those of you who are ready for international relations degree, Geopolitics 101. So Geopolitics 101 is, it's really, really costly to oppose the United States. Really costly. The costs are astronomical. You can ask the Nazi regime, you can ask the Soviet regime, right? You can ask the Japanese. It's very costly to oppose the United States. You can ask contemporary Russia. They're paying this price for reasons that you have to figure. Maybe you can figure out why the Russian regime likes to oppose the United States at every turn. It's very costly. It's also really beneficial to be on the same side as the United States. It can not always be beneficial. Sometimes it can also be ugly to be even on their same side. But if your choice is between paying the cost of opposition to the United States or trying to be partner with the United States, you take the partnership. That's Geopolitics 101. You can ask the Chinese regime. They figured this out long ago. They don't like Washington very much. They don't like American policy very much, but they're not going to pay the costs of direct confrontation with the United States. They're going to be allies and partners and reap all the benefits and pay none of the costs. Because they think that eventually, perhaps, it redounds to them and they can play their own game, not just the American game. They can maybe even change the rules. So most countries understand that having some type of beneficial relationship with the United States is a good thing if they can do it.